It is time for the final frontier of our data tables customization, importing transactions with a CSV. And we're not going to do a contrived demo of adding an import button, uploading a CSV that's all perfectly formatted and importing all the columns. We're going to do the real world, the thing that actually would show up in your sprint planning meeting where you need to make an importer, like an interface for the user to select which columns from the CSV they want to import. We're going to do it. We're going to go big. And actually, it's not that bad. And it's kind of crazy what you can do with Livewire, if I haven't said that enough. So let's do it. This is going to be another beefy episode, so buckle in. We're going to add a new button before this new button, new, called import. So let's just start with the interface. So we're going to, you know what? Yeah, okay, let's go to this dashboard thing. Okay, this is our HTML for the main dashboard component. So here's a cool thing. This importer, this is how my brain works. I feel like, okay, this is getting pretty big. This whole component, the class and the HTML, is getting really big. And this importing functionality is just going to add to that. And if there's a whole other modal and a whole other interface, is that going to be a bunch of HTML that gets passed back and forth every time? So if I feel this way, I then think to myself, is it possible to extract the importer into a nested component, into a totally separate Livewire component? So then my thought process goes, well, will it depend on any data from the parent? Will I need to pass any reactive data in? Because that's usually when I'd say, well, find a different way. It's a trade-off, and there's probably a lot more that I could dig in here that I'm not giving you about my thought process behind extracting components. But this seems like a perfect component to me because it doesn't rely on any data from outside. It can just be a standalone button with its own modal. And when it's finished importing, it can emit an event that says, hey, everybody on the page, refresh. If you care about transactions, refresh because I just imported a bunch. So it seems like the perfect opportunity to extract a component. So this is really cool because we're going to add a button on this page, but it's actually not going to affect any of the code we've written so far, which is totally awesome. It's going to be totally isolated. So let's create a new Livewire component. Make Livewire, and we're going to call it import transactions. Okay. Great. So now we have this new Livewire component. Before we dig into that, we're going to want to add it onto this page. So where do we want it? We want it between dropdown and the new button, right? Like right after bulk actions. Yeah, okay. So let's do that. We're going to add the Livewire component, import transactions. And now we're totally good. Let's go to import transactions. VS Code's not going to let me do that. Okay, import transactions. Here's the class, and then here is the view. So if we do something like, hey, there we go. It's a nested component though, so its HTML is totally separate from its parent, which is awesome. All of its requests are totally separate as well. We don't actually need a render method if we're not using it. You can always omit the render method if you don't use it. So it still works, totally good. Okay, what do we want to do? We have our button. What should we do first? Maybe we'll get this. We don't have our button. What am I saying? Let's get that button styling in. So I extracted it into a Scratch file. So we should be able to grab this entire div here and paste it right in. And let's see if it works. Okay, it does. So here is just HTML. I just did this so that you don't have to watch me flounder around with Tailwind. There's an import button. And look, it's not even wired up to the modal. So here's the modal, import transactions, CSV, select file with a file input. None of it's wired up at all. Nothing works, okay? Okay, so let's start wiring things up. Maybe let's start with the modal. Let's start with this, click this import button and get the modal. So here's the button up top, import. We're gonna say wire, click, and we'll toggle the modal. We'll say show, we can just say show modal because we won't have multiple modals here. And then let's add a piece of data called show modal, default it to false. And okay, so that's show modal. Actually, let's make it true so that we don't have to click it on every time we refresh the page. No, yeah, okay, let's make it false. All right, so we have show modal, toggle, and then now we want to bind the modal to that. So wire model equals show modal. Okay, refresh, hit import. Okay, now we show it, we cancel, we can import, we're totally good. Where should we head next? Maybe we should head to, yeah, I mean, that's the modal, that's the easy part. Let's make it so that when we click the select file, we're actually selecting a CSV file. So this is input file upload. This is the same component that I used from the profile form page. So we have this file upload, and we can very easily wire model bind to it. And we'll bind to something called upload, which is just a public property called upload. That's going to be our file. So that's going to work, but how do we know that it worked? What should we do? Maybe we will, okay, so how about this? We show this select box here, this select file thing, and we choose upload. If upload is chosen, then we hit the else statement and we show a bunch of other stuff and we hide this. So let's do that. So basically we're going to wire model to upload. If you haven't seen file uploads in Livewire, check out that video or that video series. It's very straightforward. We're binding to this property when the user selects a file. Then upload is going to be set to a temporary file object, which will then make it so that this else is hit instead of this. So let's try it out. Hit import, select file, and we'll select transactions. Okay. All right. Cannot handle file upload without Livewire with file uploads trait. So let's add the with file uploads trait. All right. Let's try that again. Select file, hit transactions, and there we go. We have our other HTML. And so here is going to be an interface. And the interface is basically going to be, I only have title right now, but we're going to have title, amount, status, and date. It's going to be 4 of them. These are going to be the words, the title of each column. And then these are going to be the columns that we detect from the uploaded CSV. So this way the user can say, okay, well, my column in my CSV is not named title, it's named label. So I'll select label. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So what's the next step here? Maybe let's just take it step by step rather than jumping ahead. So let's actually add validation to make sure that the user is uploading a valid file. So let's say on updating upload. So when the user is updating the upload field, I'm actually going to create a manual validator for specific reasons, because I actually don't want this temporary upload to get set at all until we validate it. So normally, like, you could easily do something like this, updated foo, and run your validation like, this validate, like that kind of thing. But we're going to take a different approach. We're going to do a manual validation just like you would in like an old school Laravel controller or something. So we're listening for updating upload. Updating is before it's actually set. Updated is after. Updating upload. Here's the value. That's the upload. And then we're going to use Laravel's validator, and we're going to make a validator, and the data is going to be upload value, and then the validation rules. That was probably a stylistic mistake. Okay. And then the validation rules are going to be upload is required, and it also needs to be of a MIME type of text or CSV. We don't want any MP3s throwing everything out of whack. Okay. You can also add any other, file upload validation you want, and then we're going to actually run that validator. All right. So let's see if this works. Import, hit transactions, hit open. Oh, so it actually works, right? That passed validation. Let's try a different file. What's a different file? Let's try like a JSON file. Okay. Oh, it still worked because the MIME type's probably text. Let's try this again. We are going to use what is not PHP? That would probably be considered text. Okay, great. The upload must be a file of type text or CSV. So that's good. Then we can go ahead and actually do transactions, and then it works. Great. Okay. So now that we have upload, when it's successful, we want to extract all the columns from it and store those so that we can, do stuff with them. So we're going to do that inside of an updated hook. So updated upload, that means that it worked. There's our upload. And then we can do this. And actually we don't need to get the passed in value. We can just use this arrow upload because it's already been set. So let's set something like columns equals, and we'll make a new public columns. And we're going to say columns equals, and I created a little helper class here. It's called CSV. And this is it. I was just like, how do you import CSVs in PHP? And I found this fget CSV. It's built into PHP. And yeah, I thought, let's just make our own. So this is the entirety of it. And this is just handwritten. I copy and pasted a bunch of stuff from the docs and php.net and sort of made my own thing with a nice interface rather than, downloading something big like Laravel, Mat website, Excel, or whatever. I don't know. Those are just huge packages and they just slow me down. Like, this is a much more straightforward way to get the job done, in my opinion. So CSV from, you pass in an upload file, and then I have a columns method that's just going to give you the columns. Okay. So then why don't we actually just look at that and make sure that it works? So at JSON columns. Refresh, go to import, hit open, and there we go. We have title, amount, status, and date. Here's the actual CSV that I'm pulling from. I just made this title, amount, status, and date, and just put some data in there, 2 little rows. Okay, so what do we want to do next? What we want to do next, well, we're gonna need to have all 4 of these bad boys, because right now we only have title. We're gonna need to have all 4 of these. So let's make 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's make this tiny HTML mode, bump this a little bit, and add some space in between these. Okay, and now this is title. This one's going to be amount. So let's make it amount. Actually, before we do that, what's the order we should do this in? What is the order we should do it in? All right, well, we'll keep going with this. Amount. Probably so sick of me typing this. Status. This is going to be date. And this is going to be date. Okay. Now, what are we going to do with these? I don't know how easy this is going to be for me to communicate, but here's what we want to do. This is a mapping. Each of these, this title, I want to map the title to a column from the CSV. So let's create a new piece of data called field, which is like a database field, column map. And what this is going to be is a map of fields. So title, status, date, and did I miss one? Yeah. Amount. Okay, so these are the database fields. Then we're going to allow the user to select a column from their CSV. So we have the columns here. The columns have been set in the updated hook. We have all the CSV columns. So first we should be looping through those columns to make them options. So columns, okay? And then I'm just populating options inside of a select dropdown. I know I'm throwing a lot at you because I pasted in all this stuff, but it would take so long to write this all out in a video. So now we hit import. We'll select one. Okay, we have title, amount, status, date. And now notice all of these now are populated with the columns from our CSV. So here they are. And then we can go ahead and select different things. But none of this is wire modeled up. So we need to do that. We need to wire model to field column map dot title, amount, dot status, and whatnot. So let's do that. Let's grab these, boom, boom, boom. And it's going to be wire model field column map dot. And then we'll grab the field names and paste them in. Okay. Now we refresh, go ahead, upload, and there we go. These are all blank, and they can select title, and they can select amount, date, status, we can reverse them, whatever. So there's the mapping. And I think this should make sense. I mean, this is, you'll probably, if you were building this, you might want to add a paragraph or something explaining this if it's not self-explanatory already. But yeah, that's the deal. And a lot of times they won't perfectly match like this. I just perfectly named them. To kind of demonstrate to you, if we go to, here's a different CSV. This is actually one of the exports. The columns are different. This is the actual export of the eloquent models. So there's all these things in here. So this is a better example of one where you'd be like, okay, I want to map title to title, amount to amount, status to status, and date to date. Okay, so this is a great example actually of one that's a little bit different. So here's the thing. We want to set, we want to guess, we want the system to guess what columns belong to what fields. So basically the user uploads a CSV, I want to get all the columns, and I want to have some system that goes, oh, they have a column called label. That probably means that they want to map that to title. So rather than you watching me write this out, I have this prepared and we can just copy and paste it. So here it is. It is called guess which columns map to which fields. So here's a PHP function. We're just going to add it to our component. And it's called guess which columns map to which fields. And I have this array of guesses where these are guesses for title. Title or label. Amount could be amount or price. Status could be status or state. Date for editing is date for editing or date, which I'm now actually realizing that we don't want to bind to date. We want to bind to date for editing because that's the field that we want to import. Okay. So we got this going, we got this guesser. Let's actually fire this guesser. So after the user successfully uploads a CSV, we're going to do this guessing. Guess which columns map to which fields. So now check this out. If we try to import, let's go ahead and import transactions and hit open. Now look it, they're automatically filled out. Title, amount, status, and date. If we wanted to, we could do completely different guesses. We could say we want created at to be date for editing. And now if we refresh, we go back, we select, we do transactions. Notice it's going to guess created at. So this is my own little straightforward system of guessing. It's case insensitive. And you could even go the extra mile and allow for, white space on each end, or maybe just for the existence of words within a title or whatever. But this is just what I'm choosing to do. Okay, so we have field guessing. We're doing pretty well. What's the next step? Is the next step to actually fire the import? I think it is. Let's head down that road. So we have this cancel button and this import button. First, let's wire up the cancel button. Wire click set show modal to false, and that'll hide that modal. And then the form that's wrapping up the modal will have wire submit.prevent import. And this is actually going to fire our import method here. Okay, so let's add import. I'll make this bigger for you. So now we have this import function. And what are we going to do with import? Well, there's a few things that I think we want to do. For starters, we want to add some validation, I think. I think we want to validate. So these groups here, these select dropdowns. So take a look at this. We have title and amount and status and date. So in my mind, we need there to be a title field and we need there to be an amount field. Status we can use our own default for, and same with the date. We can use the current date. So I don't think they need to have all 4 of these columns. So we can add some validation to make sure that they select title and amount at least. So let's do that. Let's do protected rules. And this is going to be field column map dot title is required. Okay, and then dot amount is also required. So let's take a look at that. If we unset this, how do we unset this? Maybe we'll just uncomment out this guess which columns for a second. Okay, so we hit that. All right, so now we have all these blank fields. We hit import, and we didn't actually do any validation. So inside of import, let's say this arrow validate. Okay, and then we're actually going to need to add the validation to these input groups. So let's do that. These two right here. Error equals, we're going to need to copy the field names. So let's get those field names, title and input. And then this is going to be errors first field column map dot title and dot amount with a quote. Okay. Now let's try this. There we go. We hit import and then we get these errors. The field column map dot title field is required. Okay, so the validation works, but this isn't good. This doesn't look good. The field column map dot title field is required. We want this to just say the title field. So to make that happen with a normal validator like validator make, you pass in data, then you pass in the rules, then you can pass in custom messages, and then you can pass in custom attributes. Like if you wanted upload to be treated as foo, then all the messaging would say foo instead of upload. So Livewire has an equivalent, if you're interested, called custom attributes. Okay, and then this, we're going to say, here are the custom attributes. We want field column map dot title to map to just title, and field column map dot amount to map to just amount. So now if we hit import, there we go. We get the title field is required, and the amount field is required. And then we can go ahead and select, we want title, we want, whatever. Okay. And then if we try import again, it passes. Great. So I think we're actually ready to do our importing. So after we validate the data, what do we want to do? Well, I think we want to grab the CSV, loop through the rows, and just create models, actually do the thing. So let's do that. CSV from this upload. And then I have a method on it called each row. And this accepts a callback that gives us back a row. And so this is going to do, it's going to do iterating. It's going to iterate through every row in a CSV, excluding the first row, the columns. And it's going to return to us an array of all of those values. So I think of this kind of like a collection each, but each row, The reason I'm doing this instead of, you could do something like get rows and then get all the rows back, and then you could loop through them or bulk import them. But I actually prefer this method because when you're dealing with large data sets in PHP, you want to avoid storing them in variables because that's when you run into memory issues. You want to stay inside of a loop like the one I'm using in CSV. This is where generators can be helpful if you're using collections and fancy stuff like that. But that's why instead of doing an insert many on the result of the entire CSV, I'm going to loop through each row and manually create a transaction each time. So transaction create, and then what are we going to put in here? So inside here, rather than showing you the code for this, well, I can at least show you the code, but I'm not going to make you write this with me. I have a method that we're going to paste in, and this is extract fields from row. Okay, so let's paste this in, and I'll explain it a little bit here. So again, I'm not really going into detail on this stuff because the stuff you came here for was the Livewire things, and I'm giving you the code so you can have it, but you don't have to watch me write every bit of it because it's just going to take so long. So extract fields from row, basically what this is, you pass in the row data of the CSV, and then I go through the field column map and I look for the mappings and I match it all up, and I even have some defaults, like the status should default to success and date for editing should default to now. So it's very simple. There's not a whole lot of code there. I just figured it's a little bit nicer than me manually writing it with you. Okay. And then we pass in that row. Great. And so this is going to return those attributes. So transaction : create is going to pass these attributes in. It's going to create the transaction. And that's that. I'm kind of curious to see if this works. Let's add back in this guess which columns map to which fields. Refresh. And actually what we're going to do is let's go ahead and select all and delete all of the rows so that we can actually see our import. So import, and let's import this one, transactions.csv. Okay, it's guessed all our columns. And now let's hit import. Okay, so nothing happened. But what if we get out of this and we refresh the page? It did the import. It did work, which is really great. That's really everything we need. We could even test further. Let's pop in this import and let's change amount to status and status to amount. I'll keep it status. We'll change title to we'll just do status and hit import. And now refresh and check it out. Processing, success. So that's our importer. It's looking pretty good. We have some other little, really that's the bulk of it. I'm surprised actually how short this was. But yeah, so what do we need to do? We need to do some extra stuff. We need to hide the modal. So let's do that. This show modal equals false. We also, if we do an import like this, let's say show modal equals false. Refresh. We're going to select a file. It's going to be transactions. Okay. Hit OK, hit import. Okay, modal disappears. Now let's hit import again, and it's all still where it was. So we want to actually reset everything. We want to reset the upload. We want to reset the everything. And to reset the entire thing, we can just call this arrow reset, and it's going to reset all of the public properties to their original state. It's going to wipe the upload. It's going to hide the modal. It's going to clear the columns in the field column map. And then it's basically going to be back to square one, which is exactly what we want actually. So let's do this again. Let's do import, transactions, open. Now import, okay? And now we hit import and we're back to square one. If we refresh, we have our results there. So that's looking pretty good. One thing we want to do is actually refresh the parent component without having to manually refresh this whole page. So this is inter-component communication. We want the nested component that's in charge of importing data to tell the parent component that's in charge of showing all the data to refresh. And to do that, we use Livewire's event system. So we can say emit up. You can just do emit, but emit up emits events to parents only and not to siblings. It doesn't really matter. We could probably just use emit. Emit will probably, yeah, let's use emit, okay. And we'll say refresh transactions, okay? And now inside of the dashboard component, we want to listen for this event now. Protected listeners equals refresh transactions. And then we can put a method. We can either make a refresh transaction method, or honestly, we can just say money sign refresh, just like you would in any action. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's, I don't know, let's delete a few of these. Bam, bam, delete, okay, delete. And now let's import transactions, okay? There we go, and there we go. It worked. It imported them. It imported those two. It was really fast. It was really sleek. Is there anything else that we need to cover here, friends? We omitted refresh. Okay, one thing I think we want to do is show some sort of success message. There's a bunch of different ways you could handle this. You could replace the contents of the modal with some message that says finished, or you could add loading states. You could do all sorts of things. But what we're going to do is actually use our notification component. If you recall, a while ago in one of the first series, we created a notification component that lives on our page that's always listening for a notify event to be fired from Alpine or Livewire, and it'll show a notification. So let's do that. Let's say dispatch browser event. This is how we communicate with browser stuff. And we're going to say notify. That's what Alpine's listening for. And then we just pass in a message. We'll say successfully, and let's just say deleted, or no, imported. We're going to want to count here transactions. Okay. So now we want a count of how many we imported. And I want to get a count without actually processing the entire CSV. So I think I'm just going to create a temporary variable called import count, and we'll start it off at 0. And then on each row, we're going to increment import count by 1. And this actually isn't going to work because, okay, so first we need to add it in a use statement, but it's not passed by reference. So we need to pass it by reference when we're inside a callback, and then it'll actually mutate the above variable. So I don't know why I'm getting an error here. Import count is 0, import count, function use, and import count. I don't know. Let's see why it's yelling at me. Unexpected. Oh, it's a colon and not a semicolon. Derp. Okay, so now we have import count, and we can concatenate in import count. And now let's check this out, okay? Import, grab transactions, hit open, hit import, imported 2 transactions. Great, and then that's just gonna disappear on its own. That's really, really freaking nice, I think. I think that's really good. Okay, do we need to do anything else? One thing I would do maybe is at some point just like macro onto the component class a notify thing, just so that you could say like imported, you know. Should we do that right now? Let's do it right now. I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's do this. Basically, we're going to put this same exact string right into here, and we're going to create a notify macro. So app service provider, we're going to create a new macro on the Livewire component class. So component macro notify, and this is going to accept a message. And then here, we're going to put in that dispatch browser event. Notify with the message. So that's just going to clean it up a little bit. And I think that's going to look really nice. Let's make sure it works. Import transactions, bada bing, bada boom, import, and it works. Imported 2 transactions. Phenomenal. Okay, so one interesting thing would be, what if, let's just make sure that this all works by selecting all of our rows, and we can do a batch export. It's transactions2.csv. And now let's see if we can import transactions2.csv. Okay, it guessed all the headings right. We hit import, and we imported 9 transactions. Everything updated. Do you want to select all 18? It's so nice how everything just updates like that. And now we have 2 pages. Let's set this to 25 so we can see it all. And it's everything just duplicated, which is totally great. So there you go. That's CSV importing with Livewire. It's surprisingly straightforward. I think you get a lot of power there. You're using straight up PHP. There's nothing super duper fancy. Yeah, I don't know. I feel pretty freaking good about this, you know? I don't know. Blade components, Livewire, I think we did something very complex very easily, and we didn't write a lick of JavaScript. We didn't write even one line of JavaScript. So that feels pretty good to me. Thanks for tuning in. And I think in the next video and the last video, which I believe I've said this before, but this is probably really the last video, we're going to add caching to this whole thing and blow it up. We are just going to do crazy things. Oh yeah, we're going to add we're going to cache results, and it's going to get super deep. And this is something I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing, but I want to show you how you could do it. I'm probably even going to regret making this video, but who cares? I'll see you in the next video.